All right, well, good evening, everyone. It's now 6:30 p.m. And I will formally declare this ordinary council meeting of the Victoria Park Council open. We are, as I understand it now, live for our live streaming. So I would like to begin with our Acknowledgement of Country, and I'd like to invite Councillor Peter Devereux to read the acknowledgement for us this evening.
I am honoured to be standing on Wajak Noongar country on the banks of the Swan River. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect past, present and emerging leaders, their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, which continues to be important today. I thank them for their contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region.
Thank you, Councillor Devereux. Item 2 on our agenda is announcements from the presiding member. So in accordance with clause 39 of the Town of Victoria Park's Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019, as the presiding member, I hereby give my permission for the administration to record proceedings of this meeting. This meeting is also being live streamed on the town's website, and by being present at this meeting, those persons present consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. And recordings of this meeting will also be available after the meeting is concluded. Public question and public statement time. There are 2 opportunities for that to occur at our ordinary council meetings. However, as this is an electronic meeting, all questions and statements needed to be submitted to the Town of Victoria Park by 12 p.m. today, and all statements and questions will be read out by myself during the course of the meeting, and I may call upon others to answer those questions that are asked in due course. Now I'd like to move to announcements, and we begin with a number of announcements, if I can put it that way. Firstly, tonight's meeting is, as I said, being held by electronic means. And that's having regard to the extensive community transmission of COVID-19 that has occurred since our last ordinary council meeting was held in February. The impact of widespread community transmission of COVID-19 is disrupting the life of our community. The town has made the difficult decision to temporarily limit the extent of some of its operations at the library and the administration building, and that started this week. This is to keep staff and community members as safe as possible. All other town facilities and services continue to operate in accordance with their current usual practice for operations. We do know as a council and individuals that this is a very difficult time for many people in our community. So I do want to say to people, I do hope that you please stay safe and remember to be patient and kind in all your interactions with everyone you meet throughout the town, whether it's our business owners, your neighbours, and certainly with the town staff. Now move on to some congratulations, and we do have 2 sets of congratulations tonight. The first one is to the Victoria Park Saviour Hockey Club. Firstly, 4 female members from their club were chosen for the 2022 Australian Hockey Roos squad, including our local Carlisle resident Jane Claxton. 1 male and 1 female member from the club was selected for the Australian indoor hockey squads. 1 male member was selected for the Australian junior indoor hockey squad, and 2 female members were selected for the Australian emerging indoor hockey squad. So that's a great result for our local club to have so many of its members be able to represent Australia and also Western Australia. My next congratulations is a really special one, and it's to East Victoria Park resident Nahal Iskel, who was inducted into the WA Women's Hall of Fame on the 4th of March this year for her contributions to the community as a human rights activist and disability advocate. Ms Iskel works with the Ethnic Communities Council of WA, where she delivers some fantastic programs for multilingual and multicultural community members. This is an enormous honour for her, and I have written to Ms Iskel on behalf of our council to offer our congratulations to her. And finally, a final announcement per se, and that is to say a thank you and a farewell to the town's finance manager, Stuart Billingham, who has resigned and will be leaving us shortly. Mr. Billingham joined the town in 2020, so right in the middle of COVID. He joined us with a full finance team, and there were certainly plenty of challenges. I think the finance team always has a lot of interesting and often difficult challenges, and Mr. Billingham came on board and was very quickly immersed in things like our budget preparations and our audit. And over the last almost 2 years, he's been a great assistant to council and also to the town's executive management and staff for his leadership of the finance team. So a big thank you, Mr. Billingham. I know that he is present in our meeting tonight in the electronic meeting room. We're very grateful for all the assistance that you've given to us over the period of your employment, and we wish you all the best on your future endeavours wherever the road may take you. So I now move over to the Mayor's report from the last February council meeting to now. And on the 19th of February, all councillors and the executive management of the town held our annual strategy day, which was to set our focus and understand more our priorities for working together for the coming year. On the 21st of February, the CEO and I met with the Chief Executive Officer of Guide Dogs WA and Everability to discuss Guide Dogs Particulari's plans for their new guide dog breeding and training program, which very excitingly is to be delivered from their headquarters in Victoria Park. So they have made a development application with regards to their site. That will be a WA first to have our own guide dog breeding and training the trainers program based in the town. Later that evening, on the 21st of February, I presided at a citizenship ceremony, our second for that month, which was unusual, where we welcomed another 29 new citizens from 16 countries. On the 27th of February, I attended the AFLW's First Nations round match-up between the West Coast Eagles women's team and the Brisbane Lions. Sadly, it wasn't to be for the West Coast Eagles women's team on that day, but hopefully the rest of the season will continue for them more successfully. And later that afternoon, I joined our community at the Burswood Peninsula for the Burswood Peninsula Neighbourhood Watch's annual community sausage sizzle, which did receive grant funding from the town last year, and that was a great afternoon. On the 3rd of March, I attended one of the town's community budget workshops to hear feedback from our community about how we should shape our budget priorities. On the 4th of March, I attended a site inspection of a new mental health transition unit being delivered by the East Metropolitan Health Service of the WA Government, and that's been created through a redevelopment of a former aged care facility in St James. And this will offer much needed alternative opportunities for people with mental health issues to recover and transition in their recovery through living in the community. On the 5th of March, I attended the last of the town's community budget workshops along with councillors Devereaux and Hendricks, where again we were hoping to hear from members of our community about budget priorities. On the 9th of March, I attended a meeting of the Victoria Park Probus Club Committee, where they shared their plans with me to celebrate their 40th anniversary in the town of Victoria Park, which will be later this year, and also to discuss their future needs as a community organisation for meeting space and function space, hopefully for them, as they've said, within the Macmillan Precinct redevelopment project sometime in the future. And on the 11th of March, I was very delighted to attend the Victoria Park Centre for the Arts International Women's Day Garden Party. I was joined by Councillor Karimi on that occasion, and I was given the great privilege of launching the Fabric of Life Community Art Wall Hanging, which was created over a period of several months last year by members of our community who attended the art pop-up workshop space at the Victoria Central Shopping Centre, and individual members of our community from diverse backgrounds came together and created art, which was beautifully put together then by the Victoria Park Centre for the Arts Sewing Circle to create a large wall hanging, which they tell me they would very much like the Town of Victoria Park to eventually showcase and hang in one of our buildings for a period of time. So let's hope we can make that happen for our local Centre for the Arts. So that concludes the Mayor's report for the month. I now move on to item 3 on our agenda, which is attendance. We have all elected members in attendance. And in terms of apologies, we do have an apology tonight from the Manager of Development Services, and there are no approved leaves of absence. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and so I'm now going to call upon the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Valletta. Do we have any declarations of interest?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we do. Through you, the Chair. Item 12.5, Councillor Peter Devereux, impartiality interest, as he's a member of the Higgins Park Tennis Club. Item 12.5, Mayor Karen Vernon, impartiality interest, as she has met with the representatives of Higgins Park Tennis Club regarding their facilities and received an email from the club secretary regarding the application for funding under the CLNP program. Item 12.2, Councillor Wilfred Hendricks, impartiality interest, as he's on the Hockey Working Group Committee. Item 12.6, Councillor Jesse Hamer, impartiality interest, as he's been appointed to the Hockey Working Group with his first meeting to be on the 17th of the 3rd, 2022. Item 12.6, Mayor Karen Vernon, impartiality interest, as she's met with the committee and representatives of the Victoria Park Xavier Hockey Club on several occasions regarding their request to have a synthetic turf facility constructed in the town. I put forward the motion in 2020 to create a hockey working group to investigate the club's request for such a facility in the town. Item 13.2, Councillor Bronwyn Ive, a financial interest, as she has a family member. A family member is the managing director of one of the companies who submitted a tender. Item 13.2, Councillor Peter Devereux, an impartiality interest, as he's a member of the Higgins Park Tennis Club. Item 13.4, Mayor Karen Vernon, impartiality interest, as she's been involved in the communications with residents impacted by the multi-use courts at Coolbardie Park since 2020, have met with those residents and staff regarding requests to limit the use of the courts, including through the implementation of a system for locking the gates at set times. Item 13.5, Councillor Bronwyn Ive, impartiality interest. She's met with the lead petitioner to discuss this matter further.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So now going to turn to elected members and ask, are there any elected members who have additional declarations of interest that have not yet been notified? If so, I'm going to ask you to raise your electronic hand and I will come to you in due course. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'd like to declare an impartiality for 12.6 as I'm a member of the Hockey Working Group.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Are there any other elected members who have a interest that they need to declare but have not yet done so? Thank you. Just a gentle reminder, if it does occur to you between now and when an item comes up that you do indeed have a declaration of interest that you should have made, it is important that you let me know before we begin discussing that item. Thank you. So now move on to item 5, which is public question time. Item 5.1 is response to previous public questions taken on notice at the Ordinary Council meeting held on the 15th of February 2022. There are currently no responses necessary to that. So move on now to item 5.2, which is public question time. So in terms of public question time, as I stated at the outset, these are questions that have been submitted in advance by 12 p.m. today to the town's administration. So although it is the case that when we've had in-person meetings, we have limited the number of questions per person in order to manage the number of people we've had attending in the public gallery who wish to ask questions. Today, we've only had questions submitted by 2 parties, one of whom has well more than 2 questions or 3 questions, but I'm going to endeavour to ask all of those questions and have them answered. So please bear with me. So the first series of questions are from the Ratepayers Association. The question reads, in response to the answers provided at the agenda briefing forum, I submit the following. 1, in regards to the association's question 7, the town advised that it possesses 3 road sweepers, and the response to question 8 was that each sweeper does a minimum of 800 hours per year. Whilst the minimum number of hours is of some value, the question was how many machine hours per year is recorded for each sweeper? Can this question be answered, please? I'm going to direct that question to our Chief Operations Officer, Ms Adams.
So through the chair, with the advance notice, we were able to look back in our records, and I'll give you the breakdown we've got for each of those street sweepers. So the large street sweeper is registration 162 VPK. That's actually done on kilometres. So we have a kilometre reading for the year of 8,204 kilometres. For the medium road sweeper, which is registration 177 VPK, we had a total of 881 hours. For the small path sweeper, which is registration 136 VPK, we had 801 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Adams. The next question is, 800 machine hours per year represents an average of 3 hours per weekday. What is the operator of the machine doing for the remaining 5 hours per day? Direct that question to Ms Adams.
So through the chair, I think I'd perhaps want to just address if there's an underlying concern that, whether staff or machines are parked up and idle, and that's not the case. So for the operation of those, for the operators, they are actually doing, for example, street and bus stop bin repairs. There's replacement installation. There's the maintenance of the machines as well. And there's additional works that the waste operators undertake in conjunction with actually operating the road sweeper.
Thank you, Ms Adams. The next question states, it appears that these machines are underutilised and each machine is only being used for an average of 3 hours per day. Why doesn't the town reduce the fleet to 2 machines so that this usage would increase to 4.5 hours per day per machine? In addition, there would be 1 less operator's salary to cover. Ms Adams.
Through the chair, the town wouldn't be looking to reduce at all the number of machines because those machines operate on a rotational basis. So there are other things that need to be done with the machines. They're out of action for some of the time due to maintenance and the like. So we would be looking to keep the 3 machines that we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Adams. The next question is, there is no shortage of sand, leaves and litter on our streets. So why doesn't the town put these machines to work for more hours? Ms Adams.
Through the chair, these machines are working at their capacity at the moment. So whilst it appears simplistically on average to be operating for 3 hours a day, there are other activities that are required to maintain those sweepers. So for example, they need to be emptied. So the medium sweeper, for example, gets emptied 4 times a day. They need to be washed out. The freshwater tanks have to be refilled. The large sweeper has to be greased daily. So there are other activities that need to be done that so those machines are not sitting there idle and not being used. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Adams. The next part of the question from the Ratepayers Association says, in relation to the answer provided to question 3, the town advised that a security contractor provided concierge services for vaccination mandate checking at a cost of $150,000. I think there's supposed to be a question there, So perhaps can I direct that question to our Acting Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Ellis, as to whether that answer from the town about the cost of the security contractor is correct?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. The cost was a provisional sum for 4 weeks coverage across those 4 sites. Some of those sites operate 14+ hours a day, and it was in response to the Premier's announcement that proof of vaccination would be required at some of those venues, such as gyms and health centres.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. The next question says, please advise what state government health order or health orders requires the town to check vaccination status at the leisure centre, the pool, the library and the office? Direct that question to Mr. Ellis.
Thank you. The Premier's announcement, which came into effect 31st of January, affected the pool and the leisure centre. The other sites were not affected by a mandate. However, the concierge service provided was to check that people were wearing masks, that they were checking in on arrival, answering questions related to those requests, to enable the staff to provide service as they usually would through that period.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. When you prefaced your answer to that question for the Ratepayers Association by saying the Premier's announcement came into effect on the 31st of January, do you understand there to be a public health order behind the Premier's announcement?
I do. I don't have a number or reference for that announcement, though that could be provided.
Thank you. On behalf of the Ratepayers Association, I'd like to take that on notice for them so that you can provide that detail at the next meeting. Yep, in the minutes. Thank you. The next question is, still from the Ratepayers Association, if the requirement to check vaccination status is the town's own policy, can you please provide a copy of that policy, including when it was approved by council? Direct that question again to Mr. Ellis.
Thank you. The council has no policy on that.
Thank you. So just to clarify on behalf of the ratepayers, Mr. Ellis, does that mean that where it is a requirement for the town to check vaccination status of persons entering the town's facilities, is that a requirement under WA government's rules, not the town's? Mr. Ellis?
That's correct.
Thank you. The next question is, if the requirement to check vaccination status is the town's own policy, can you please provide a copy of the risk assessment used and the details of the mitigation measures applied to avoid potential litigation in respect of the Discrimination Act and any other human rights violations that may occur as a result of implementing that policy? Direct that again to Mr. Ellis.
Thank you. Based on the previous answers, I would see that as not applicable.
Thank you. The next question is, a number of in-person meetings were held by town staff with members of the public to discuss the budget. These were apparently conducted in cafes. Please provide the risk assessment used to conduct these meetings, as it appears a different criteria was used to that which was used to determine that it was unsafe to hold in-person council meetings. Can I direct that question, please, to Mr. Ellis?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. The town hosted 3 cafe conversations as part of community participation activities for the budget. These sessions all adhered to physical distancing, vaccination certification and mask requirements, which are applicable per the health conditions set by the state government, not by the town. And they were in practice small conversations between groups of 2 and 3, so not comparable to council meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Can I also ask to clarify for the Ratepayers Association in relation to the first 2 of those cafe budget conversations, were they held prior to the opening of the board borders in Western Australia to members of the rest of the Australian community and the world?
From memory, yes, though if you'd like an exact answer, I would take that on notice. I'd need to check.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. For the record, the first of those budget conversations was held on the 28th of February and the second on the 4th of March, prior to the opening of the borders on the 5th of March. Only the last of those cafe conversations was held on the 5th of March in the afternoon after borders opened at 12:01 a.m. that morning. Thank you. The next question is also from the Ratepayers Association. Other than to users of social media, how has the town invited and or advertised these public budget meetings? Were minutes of these meetings taken and who attended? And I should say, in regards to the question of who attended, I don't consider that the staff are required to identify the names of those members of the community who attended. Mr. Ellis, are you able to help us with those three questions?
I am, thank you. So the workshops were advertised via social media, the town's website, and its e-newsletter platforms. There were no minutes taken at the workshops. They were informal, with conversations often occurring between the elected members and community members, as indicated earlier, in groups of 2 and 3. And those sessions were held across different locations at different times to enable people to attend. As you identified, we didn't keep records of attendees from the community, so couldn't provide them in any case.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis, I wonder if I could just confirm, I was wondering if we actually put an advertisement in the newspaper about the cafe conversations. Something sticks in my mind about seeing something, but I might be wrong.
I'm advised that we did not.
Okay, thank you. So the next two questions come from Steve Walker of Bentley. The first question is, does the town of Victoria Park intend to allow bus routes down Burswood Road from and to Grandeston Highway to any linking side street to Shepparton Road? Direct that question to our Chief Community Planner, Ms. Natalie Martin-Good.
Through the Chair, the town isn't the approval authority for bus routes. The Public Transport Authority is the bus route approving body. It's noted, however, that Burswood Road is actually wide enough to accommodate a bus route if desired, and some side streets aren't necessarily suitable for buses.
Thank you. The second question for Mr. Walker reads, does Town of Victoria Park understand the benefit of having a singular service bus route linking direct from Albany Highway Victoria Park to Burswood Road, avoiding the Victoria Park transfer station? Can I direct that to Ms. Martin-Good?
Through the Chair, in short, yes. The town's draft transport strategy recommends advocating for a mid-tier transit system that includes improved connection to the Burswood area.
Thank you. That concludes public question time. We'll now move on to item 6 in our agenda, which is public statement time. So in terms of public statement time, I propose to read out the statements that have been submitted in advance, subject obviously to those statements complying with our meeting procedures local law. The first statement is from Neil Teo of Dynamic Planning and Development. His statement relates to item 12.2 on tonight's agenda, which is the request for an extension of the development approval for 84 to 88 Goodwood Parade, Burswood. His statement reads, we, Dynamic Planning and Developments Pty Limited, act as the applicant for item 12.2 of the Ordinary Council meeting, which relates to a development application at lots 99 to 101, numbers 84 to 88, Goodwood Parade, Burswood, herein referred to as the subject site. We are providing this short written letter to thank the presiding member for reading our agenda briefing forum statement in its entirety to give the councillors the full context of our development application. We appreciated the collaborative discussion that was held at the Council's Agenda Briefing Forum on the 1st of March 2022. To reiterate, we would like to note our full support for the proposed development application and the Office's positive recommendation for an extension to the existing approval of the tavern and brewery land uses at the site until the 1st of July 2033. We consider the existing land use at the subject site provides significant community benefit and is one that should continue to operate for as long as possible prior to the local area being substantially redeveloped. Again, that was from Neil Teo from Dynamic Planning Developments regarding item 12.2. The next statement is from Mr. Vince Maxwell. He has two statements. I'll read the first statement, which relates to item 15.5, removal of public participation at Agenda Briefing Forum. His statement reads, I wish to lodge an objection to the town's recommendation to permanently remove the public participation time from the end of the agenda briefing session. This decision is contrary to the town's strategic community plan that the town is transparent and accountable, and the town's slogan, we are open. The reason provided in the staff report that no complaints were received also is contrary to the town's claim to be proactive. There was no attempt by the town to canvass the views of electors, and a number of verbal complaints at meetings were ignored. This decision to trial the removal of the second question period was, in my view, an exercise to hide a true intention to further restrict public participation, as it has already done in most other forums, including the unnecessary holding of meetings online. The second statement from Mr. Maxwell relates to item 15.4, the waste local law. I formally object to the council providing the CEO with the power to issue infringements without warning under this proposed waste local law. I have decided as the presiding member to redact the next sentence from the submitted statement, as it is an adverse reflection and is contrary to our meeting procedures local law. The statement continues, infringements under the waste management local law should only be permissible after due notice has been served and refused. As the law stands, an owner could be issued with a $350 infringement because they have inadvertently placed an item in the wrong bin, or worse still, a passerby may have inserted something into the owner's bin without their knowledge. Once issued, an infringement has the effect of making the owner responsible to prove their innocence. The power to infringe is not something the council should provide to the town without associated strong controls around its usage. I recommend that additional protections be included in this local law before it is passed. That's the end of the statements submitted by Mr. Maxwell. Next statement is submitted, we have two from Mr. Walker. His first statement relates to item 12.1, Burswood South Streetscape Improvement Plan and its November 2021 public consultation. Support a business high street. As presiding member, I have determined that the next sentence of the submitted statement is an adverse reflection, and I have redacted it from the statement accordingly, as it is a breach of our meeting procedures local law. The statement continues, should be some bus through routes on the main street. Think more on-street parking should be provided on Craig Street to make up for disincentivising parking on Burswood Road. Allowing more on-street parking here to allow for less parking on the main streets. Disappointed that talk of how the Burswood Streetscape Improvement Plan can interface with future Shepparton Road final upgrade that could allow easier pedestrian movement to and from Albany Highway, in effect linking them. Take into account the 6-lane Shepparton Road plan reserve. It is supposed to be widened in both directions to 6 lanes, 2 being bus, and turn pockets. Streetscaped, etc. by Main Roads WA with upgraded lighting and pathways. Possibly Main Roads WA and Town of Victoria Park could work out an arrangement for a future digital advertising signage that can also show advertising message for Burswood South Mixed Use Centre. I said, quote, get a plan together to get rid of all the ugly proliferating street signage, poles, etc. that exist on verges, including tacky neon stuff. I meant poles, etc. Other examples of that over-proliferation are Stirling Highway and Albany Highway. We were talking of the fixed signage, not portable signage. Plus, in your future low-speed roads, there is ample time for motorists to see what building is where. Disappointing that no near-future bus service linking direct from Albany Highway Victoria Park via Twickenham Road or Teddington Road to Burswood Road. End the isolation of Burswood South Mixed-Use Strategic Centre from your Albany Highway Activity Centre. That's the end of the first statement from Mr Walker. The second statement from Mr Walker relates to item 12.6, progressing a Victoria Park Xavier Hockey Club turf facility. And his statement reads, encourage options 1 and options 2 to be progressed. Urge staff and council members to not keep adding conditions and complexity to them. Never seems to be this many hurdles for other sports. That ends the public statements that we have received. So now call public statement time closed. We'll move on to item 7 on our agenda, which is confirmation of minutes and receipt of notes from any agenda briefing forum. The recommendation is that Council 1 confirms the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 15 February 2022, 2 receives the notes of the agenda briefing forum held on 1 March 2022, and 3 receives the notes of the Madeira Advisory Group meeting held on 23 February 2022. So elected members, we are doing electronic voting tonight, so can I please have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved Councillor Karimi, seconded Councillor Hendricks. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Item 8 is presentation of minutes from external bodies. The recommendation is that Council 1 receives the minutes of the South East Metropolitan Zone meeting held on 16 February 2022, and 2nd, receives the minutes of the Tamala Park Ordinary Council meeting held on 22 February 2022. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that recommendation?
Still seeking a seconder.
Moved Councillor Devereux, seconded Councillor Hendricks. Is there any dissent? There being no indication of dissent, declare that carried unanimously. We now move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is presentations. 9.1 petitions, we have none. 9.2 presentations, we have none. 9.3 deputations, we have none. Item 10 on the agenda is the method of dealing with agenda business. The method of dealing with agenda business, the recommendation is that the following items be adopted by exception resolution and the remaining items be dealt with separately. Firstly, item 11.3, Council Resolutions Status Report. Secondly, item 12.2, 84 to 88 Goodwood Parade, Burswood, Amendment to Development Approval, Extension of Time. Thirdly, item 12.4, Draft Local Planning Strategy, Consultation Outcomes and Recommendation Modifications. Fourth, item 12.5, Higgins Park Tennis Club, Community Night Lights Program Application. Number 5 is item 12.7, West Australian Recreational Water Sports Association Community Sport and Recreation Facilities Fund Application. 6 is item 13.1, Lathlane Area Traffic Management Evaluation. Number 7 is item 13.4, Kulbadi Park Gates. Number 8 is item 13.5, response to petition, traffic calming and zebra crossing. Number 9 is item 14.1, financial statements, January 2022. Number 10 is item 14.4, schedule of accounts, January 2022. Number 11 is item 15.1, review of policy 251, rainforest timbers use in town construction. Number 12 is item 15.2, review of policy 252, nuclear free zone. 13 is item 15.3, review of policy 302, investment. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for this recommendation?
Still seeking a mover.
Moved Councillor Hamer, seconded Councillor Potter. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. We now move to item 11.1 under the Chief Executive Officer reports. The first of these is adoption of the Strategic Community Plan 2022 to 2034. This is a matter that requires an absolute majority. As an elected member, I wish to test an alternate motion ahead of the officer's recommendation. And I'd like to read out to you my alternate motion, which I seek to move in the following terms. And if administration have access to the electronic copy of my alternate motion, I'd be grateful if you could put that on the screen. Thank you. So my alternate motion is that Council 1 acknowledges feedback received from the community as at attachment 1. Secondly, acknowledges elected member feedback and changes made as a result as at attachment 2. Thirdly, notes the draft Strategic Community Plan 2022 to 2034 as at attachment 3. And 4, request the Chief Executive Officer to bring a report back to the April ordinary meeting of Council with the further inclusion or consideration of an alternative draft version of the Strategic Community Plan 2022 to 2032 that A, deletes the mission of leaders in unlocking potential, B, reinstates the 4 pillars of sustainability, namely social, economic, environment and civic leadership, as contained in the current Strategic Community Plan 2017 to 2032 as the mission. C, allocates the community priorities under each of the 4 pillars of sustainability in the same organisational manner as appears in the current Strategic Community Plan. And D, includes 2 further community priorities aligned to civic leadership related to, firstly, communication and engagement with the community, and secondly, governance and leadership. I'll outline my reasons for moving this alternate. This alternate motion reflects the importance of getting our most important strategic document right. All that is being proposed by the alternate is the presentation at next month's meeting of an alternate draft version that retains the 4 pillars of sustainability with the accompanying narrative to see the comparison with the current proposed draft that is on tonight's agenda. After considering all the feedback we received from our community, including around understanding of the proposed new mission, Leaders in Unlocking Potential, I believe that the 4 pillars of sustainability continues to be the right mission for the town. And I believe it is consistent with all the feedback received during this major review of the SCP. It certainly gives overarching clarity to the community priorities and ensures that our focus will be on delivering the best outcomes for our community in the way we approach each of these refined and new community priorities. The proposed amendment timeframe for the plan down to 10 years instead of 12 years is to recognise that planning beyond 10 years is too speculative and will only be superseded by the 2- and 4-yearly review regime in the current legislation anyway. The request for 2 additional community priorities around communication and engagement with the community and governance leadership is to reflect the feedback that I read from the community about the importance of our communications and engagement with them and their desire for council to be leaders and make the right decisions. Currently, the broadly civic leadership-based priority, which is contained in the new list of 12 priorities, is too broadly worded to encapsulate these other important issues. Could I please seek a seconder for my alternate motion? Seconded, Councillor Ife. So thank you. The alternate motion is on the table. I'll speak to it, but hopefully only briefly so. I hope that elected members understand my intent with this. I did deliberate over a long period of time about how I might do this. It probably comes as no surprise. I put in some extensive elected member feedback on the draft. I did propose that the 4 pillars of sustainability should go back into our new draft revised strategic community plan, but that wasn't a direction that was taken up by the administration in preparing the document that is now before us. Thinking a lot about the potential for me to seek an amendment to tonight's recommendation by simply including what I see as being important isn't, in my view, the right way to proceed. The right way to proceed is to have the opportunity to consider what a strategic community plan would look like if we put back the 4 pillars of sustainability as an overarching framework and informing part of this important strategy. Given the work that has been done, and given that we do already have the 4 pillars of sustainability in the current strategic community plan, I consider there's ample opportunity for the document to be revised so that it includes more of that original 4 pillars of sustainability framework. When I considered a lot of the comments that were made, which have been shared with elected members and are part of the agenda report tonight, I did note that there were members of our community who were quite confused about the mission being leaders in unlocking potential. There were people who considered it was a generalist statement, people who thought that it was ambiguous and it could mean many things. I don't think having a mission that some people consider to be ambiguous is necessarily a good thing. I do feel like the input that we got from our community showed how important the 4 pillars of sustainability were to them back in 2016 and 17 when the existing plan was adopted, and how much they continue to not only be important to them, but to be an informing basis for what we do. And this is, in my view, a great way to wrap that around and to see what it would look like with the new refined community priorities. I feel certain that although the new community priorities as drafted could potentially fall within more than one of these pillars, I'm fairly certain there is a way to organise them so that they can neatly encapsulate where they belong in the pillars of sustainability. So I'm asking you to support this alternate so that we can have that opportunity to have a look and continue that important discussion, not for a lot longer, because we have been at this project now for over a year, but for a short amount of time, and noting the officer's report says it's intended to have a new strategic community plan adopted by June 2022, when we're hoping to have our work done on a new corporate business plan, certainly ahead of the next budget year. There seems to me to be ample time for us to do what is being proposed and make sure that we as a council have put the right stamp on this document. So that's it from me. Councillor Ife, as a seconder, would you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mevan, and I will speak very briefly. I was pleased when I saw this alternate proposed, not because it's turning the strategic community plan on its head, but because it's giving us an opportunity to consider one with just a couple of important changes made. And I have to say, I'm delighted to see a proposal that we try the strategic community plan without the Leaders in Unlocking Potential mission. I was never comfortable with it. And when I saw the feedback for the community, I actually really felt that they were reflecting opinions that I had felt when we discussed that mission. So I'm really pleased to have another pass at this, I suppose, to just tweak those last little corners to make sure that we are putting forward our best possible strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor I. So I'm going to ask, is there any dissent to the alternate? Noting that if there is dissent, I'll obviously call upon us to go into the usual debate. No, I will formally ask, since it is an important matter, is there anyone who wishes to be heard, either for or against? No, so no one's indicated they wish to be heard and no one's indicated any dissent. So I declare the alternate motion carried unanimously. Thank you, and thank you to my fellow elected members for giving due consideration to this opportunity and to supporting it. So we'll now move on to item 11.2, and that is the mid-year corporate business plan review. This matter requires an absolute majority. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses amendments to the Corporate Business Plan 2017 to 2022 as contained in the analysis section of this report, and secondly, request the Chief Executive Officer to publish the amended version of the Corporate Business Plan 2017 to 2022. Can I call please for a mover and a seconder? Moved myself, Mayor Vernon, seconded Councillor Vicky Potter. Is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item, 11.3, has already been dealt with by exception resolution. So we move now to item 12, the Chief Community Planner reports. Item 12.1 is Burswood South Streetscape Improvement Concept Plan Final Plan. Stated this is an absolute majority item. The recommendation is that Council adopts the Burswood South Streetscape Improvement Plan, Attachment 1, as a document that informs the revitalisation of streetscapes in the Burswood South mixed-use precinct, subject to future detailed design and funding. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for this recommendation? Moved Councillor Devereux, seconded myself, Mayor Vernon. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 12.2, which has already been dealt with by way of exception resolution. We then come to the next item on the list, which is 12.3, Management and Maintenance of Public Spaces Draft Position Statement. So elected members, in accordance with our meeting procedures local law, I wish to test an alternate motion for this matter ahead of the officer's recommendation. That alternate motion has been shared with elected members, so I'd be grateful if the administration could bring that up on the screen, please. My alternate recommendation or alternate motion is as follows: that Council 1 supports the Town of Victoria Park to continue to have discussions with Metronet about the future management and maintenance of new public open space areas to be created from the Victoria Park Canning Level Crossing Removal Project. Secondly, request the Chief Executive Officer to obtain details from Metronet about the future management and maintenance of the new public open spaces to be created, sufficient to allow for a risk assessment of the impact on the town from future responsibility for the cost of maintenance and management, including but not limited to the total estimated size of the public open spaces, the detailed plans for the public open spaces, the total estimated construction costs by Metronet for the public open spaces, and any estimated costs of future management and maintenance. And thirdly, request the Chief Executive Officer to report to Council by June 2022 as to the progress of those discussions. The reason for moving this alternate motion and seeking to test it ahead of the officer's recommendation is as follows. The report to council states that, and I quote, the concept designs developed by Metronet in collaboration with the town currently reflect best practice design and, if delivered, consistent with those designs, will provide valuable public open space for the town. Notwithstanding that, Metronet has not at this stage provided our council with how much public open space is to be created, who will own the public open spaces provided, who will have the final decision about what will be provided within the public open spaces, detailed concept plans of the public open spaces, what rights and responsibilities Metronet expects the town to have in any future agreement, the construction costs for Metronet of public open spaces, the estimated management and maintenance costs for Metronet in the first 2 years, and the list of unknowns goes on. The draft letter that's included in the report proposes negotiables that the town should agree to endorse. It would not be prudent for council at this time, in my view, to endorse any principles to guide discussions with Metronet, because until this level of information is provided to council, we cannot know or understand what parameters should be set for negotiations in future. The town administration have been required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Council last received a project update from Metronet in the first half of 2021, and little more is known about a potentially significant financial liability for the town if we commit to negotiating already without better understanding what could be involved. This alternate makes clear that discussions can and must continue, but will ensure that we get an update on those discussions and learn more about Metronet's position in order to determine our own. It is only at that stage that we should determine the principles for any future negotiations and agreements. The proposed timeframe in this alternate to June is realistically only now about 8 weeks away, when the timing of report writing for the June Ordinary Council meeting is considered, given that the update will need to be ready by the end of May. Given the long lead-in time for the Metronet project, this time should be well spent obtaining detailed and useful information for council to assess its starting position. Could I call please for a seconder for my alternate? Seconded Councillor Vicky Potter, thank you. So the alternate motion is on the table for consideration. I'll just speak really briefly. This is a matter that causes me some considerable concern, because understanding from the communications from Metronet that they wish the town to actually enter into an agreement that will see the town take on in perpetuity, as I understand it, the long-term management and maintenance costs of the public open spaces that are proposed to be created along this project. There are such a lot of unknowns, and I don't think asking for a degree of detail and asking for information that can be properly used to assess where our risks lie so that we can begin to understand what really should be the terms for negotiating. I don't think that's too much to ask, and I accept that the town staff, those who are directly involved in liaising and discussing with Metronet, are bound by non-disclosure agreements, and that's a requirement of Metronet, not a requirement of the town. So the town staff are limited in what information they've been able to share with elected members. I think now the state government has made it clear that it's going ahead with this project. And on that basis, it's now really important, if they're committing that type of funding to it, that they do begin to reveal the detailed information that we as a local government would need to know before we can really provide even in-principle support. Because saying that we'll provide in-principle support and then it's all to be subject to agreement later does mean that we start with our other party, namely Metronet, believing that we are already supportive. And it's too soon to understand what we should be agreeing to support. And so I want us to have the best information. This will be a significant commitment that the Town of Victoria Parks Council will be asked to make on behalf of not just its current community, but all future communities to come, and indeed something that may very well bind future councils for a very long time into the future. So I don't feel like we can afford to get this wrong. I don't feel like what's being proposed is too much to ask. It's a shortish window of time where I'm sure that the town's administration will be able to impress upon Metronet our desire for more information, so that we can know that when we come to any table for negotiation, if we come to such a table, that we're doing it with a clear understanding of where we stand in the grand scheme of things. So that's it from me. Councillor Potter, as the seconder, do you wish to be heard?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I will speak really briefly. I just wanted to say I would like to thank you for this alternate recommendation. When I saw the recommendation on this item, read the item, I was very uncomfortable with agreeing to take on the maintenance of public open space and areas that we have absolutely no idea what they're going to look like, what's going to be included, or what our risk is going to be. So I think there's definitely a case for more information and more questions to be asked before accepting that. And so I support this alternate motion.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Given that I certainly haven't discussed my alternate motion with elected members prior to tonight, apart from sharing the terms of it with you, I am prepared to just follow our meeting procedures rule and ask, is there anyone who would wish to now speak against the proposed alternate? Councillor Devereux.
I actually have a question, Mayor Vernon.
By all means, by all means.
So not to speak against, but to ask a question. I asked a similar question at the agenda briefing forum, just around the mention in the documents of lease areas as a potential future source of income, and to what extent we had some guarantee that there would be the opportunity for leases around stations that would help us generate income for the costs that we would incur in terms of upkeep of the open space. And I just wanted to see if you thought more, seeking more information about that would be reflected in the way you talk about including but not limited to the elements you've mentioned, because I think the cost of maintaining public open space is key, but also the opportunity through mixed use around transit-oriented development is internationally a big source of making viable activation centres. So I just wanted to see if you thought that would be captured in your suggested alternate motion, or how we might consider that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Devereux, for the question. It's a very interesting one. I would frame my answer by saying that reading the officer's report doesn't indicate where the evidentiary basis would be for seeking to proceed as part of the, I guess, principles of this discussion liaison / negotiation into the future lies around the ability to secure access to lettable or rentable space in what I understand to be either of the two new train stations that would be built as part of this project. So I don't purport to know, and I haven't read anything so far that explains to me why that's actually likely to be something that we could even achieve. So I don't know if the proposed designs of the stations by Metronet include lettable commercial space. As far as I'm aware, unless I'm mistaken, outside of the CBD, where there is naturally a massive train station hub that does have rentable space attached to it, apart from the end destinations of the railway line, possibly in Fremantle, I'm not aware of any midline rail stations, apart from the one under construction at Bayswater, which is going to be an interchange with the airport underground line, of any of those normal stops along the way actually having rentable space in them of any size. So to me, I would agree with you, there's probably a lot of work that would need to be done to understand whether, based on the likely costs of managing and maintaining the public open spaces in the future, whether whatever that cost is could ever be offset by having rentable commercial spaces within the train stations within our town. And I know that perhaps the loosest example of this is to say, well, yes, what if there were to be, say, a cafe space in the train station? But we have to remember we're a town that has loads of cafes, and a lot of them are owned by local residents running small businesses. So I don't purport to understand how that paradigm works, but I would agree with you that certainly there are major train stations in other cities around the world that I've been to myself and seen them have commercial lettable space inside the train station, but I have no idea how successful it is. I have no idea what income generation levels it has. Some of that is both real estate questions and commercial questions, and frankly, requires a lot of speculation well into the future. So to come back to your point about whether I thought that that could be included as part of my alternate, I didn't consider it specifically in the way you've raised it, but what I wanted to do was try to get the ball rolling with the type of information that might be important to inform that conversation later, because I don't yet know if we should be negotiating saying, yes, in principle, we support this, but only if you agree that the town can become the landlord of some rentable space in the hope that it can later offset the costs of management from this revenue stream. Does that make sense? So for me, it was hard to know how I could ever encapsulate that as part of my alternate motion. So I didn't want it to become an overwhelming shopping list of things that we asked for. I wanted to try and get the biggest parts of the unknowns to try to narrow those down, because I think only when we know more about those will we actually know better what questions to ask about some of the other things. And clearly my alternate, in not endorsing the officer's recommendation, moves a step away from that suggestion that we should be endorsing as part of the in principle agreement that this is one of the negotiables that we want to start with. I don't know if it is. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I think it does. So yes, I think so. You're not wanting to include it, I think is what I understand from what you're saying. Thanks.
Probably I wouldn't go so strong as saying not wanting to include it. Did not look at including it because there would have to be a natural end to where I would stop the list of things that I was seeking to articulate should be included. So I just said including, but not limited to those things. So if there was more information to be gained along that score, I would feel comfortable that the town staff would know and understand that's a line of inquiry that they should be making. If you were uncomfortable and thought that perhaps that needed to be made explicit, then certainly you would be within your rights to propose an amendment. And you could do that one of two ways, asking me as the mover of the alternate to incorporate it, or you would formally move it on the floor yourself. Does that help?
Thanks. Yes, that's very helpful, Mayor Vernon. Well, in that sense, I would request that you consider adding it as an E, for example, to your list, to just seek information on the leasable spaces, because it was explicitly talked about in the accompanying documents with the agenda briefing forum, talked about leasable spaces, and I did ask questions at the time, and as I say, I think it is something worth seeking further evidence, because we don't want to just look at the negatives of the costs, but also the potential to generate income. Thanks.
So thank you, Councillor Devereux. So what we'd need to do is hear very explicitly the words that you want added as E. So would it be something along the lines of, so it would be including but not limited to E, the potential lettable spaces that might be available for the town of Victoria Park for the purposes of future revenue generation?
Correct, yeah. Investigate the potential for future lettable spaces because that would be applicable for all along the line, not just our town. So it would be something of general interest, I think, to other people that are on the line as well.
Thank you. I just need to make clear that at this point in time, it's not necessarily about investigating those things. This is only asking the town staff to obtain details from Metronet. So I think a starting point would be to include what I said for E. So
Yes.
I wonder if I could inquire then from the Minutes Secretary, if you're available to assist with adding these words into my alternate motion, while the Minutes Secretary considers her ability to assist with that. Councillor Potter, as the seconder of my alternate, would you be happy if we incorporated something along those lines that I just indicated?
Yeah, I'm happy for that, Mayor Vernon, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So our Minutes Secretary, Ms. Horner, are you able to, on the screen, add in a further point E?
Yes, ready when you are.
All right, so E would read, any potential future lettable spaces
Yes.
suitable for the town to use for revenue generation.
I have that. I'll just pop it up on the screen.
Thank you. Councillor Devereux, once it goes up on the screen, if you have a look and tell me if you think that captures it well enough.
One moment, I'll try again.
If I could just ask the Minutes Secretary, could you change the spelling of lettable from letterable to L-E-T-T-A-B-L-E, please?
Mayor Vernon, I think in the ABF documents they talked about leasable spaces. It might be worthwhile considering using similar language to what was.
I'm happy for that to be. I'm happy for that to be.
And it might be easy to spell as well.
All right. So, Ms. Horner, are you able to delete lettable and insert leasable? Thank you. Councillor Devereux, anything further in that regard?
No, many thanks.
Thank you. So I will go back now and ask, is there any elected member who would wish to speak against the alternate motion? Not seeing any indications. Is there any elected member who wishes to ask other questions or speak to the alternate motion? No. So I formally call, is there any dissent to the alternate motion? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your support of that alternate motion. And thanks, Councillor Devereux, for your useful addition to it. So we now move on to item, the next item on the agenda is actually 12.4, which has been dealt with by exception resolution, as has 12.5. So we now come to 12.6, the Victoria Park Xavier Hockey Club turf facility, request to proceed to business case. So the recommendation is that that Council firstly endorses the following locations to be considered in further detail via a business case process in relation to future facilities for the Victoria Park Xavier Hockey Club. And very briefly, those options are option 1, Charles Patterson Reserve, option 2, McCallum and Taylor Reserve, and option 3, Perth Hockey Stadium at Curtin University. The full recommendation for this matter is on page 78 of the Ordinary Council meeting agenda, and given its length, I'm not going to read it out in its entirety. Can I call please for a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Deputy Mayor Anderson, you have your hand raised. Is there an issue?
No, Mayor Vernon, I was waiting to move my amendment, so I will wait.
Thank you. I need to have it on the floor first. Thank you. Going back, can I call now please for a mover and a seconder? Moved Councillor Hendricks, seconded Councillor Hamer. Councillor Hendricks?
No, I've got nothing.
Did you wish to be heard?
No, thank you, Mayor Vernon.
Thank you. Councillor Hamer as the seconder, did you wish to be heard?
Nothing from me, thank you, Mayor Vernon.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'd just like to make a small amendment, and that reads as that Council amend the recommendation at A to read option 1, Charles Patterson Reserve, including consideration of 1, synthetic turf, supporting grass fields, club and change rooms, provision for spectators and necessary storage space. And the reason being, the amendment there is really just to include the supporting grass fields, and that's actually to allow that when we're doing the business case to investigate this right at the beginning, whether the supporting grass fields can fit in with the turf right at the beginning. So it's just that small amendment for Charles Patterson Reserve.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Anderson. Can I call please for a seconder for the recommendation? Sorry, for the amendment. Seconded Councillor Creamy. Deputy Mayor Anderson, did you wish to speak further to your proposed amendment?
No, thank you, Mayor. I think it's quite a simple amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Karimi as the seconder. Did you wish to speak to the proposed amendment?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any dissent? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'm not going to support this recommendation. And I understand that it's for a business case. So part of me sort of thought maybe I should just let it go through the process and see what comes out of it. But I have a major problem with the option 2, McCallum and Taylor Reserve.
Sorry, Councillor Potter, can I interrupt you? We're only dealing with Deputy Mayor Anderson's amendment.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, not a problem. So if you wouldn't mind reducing your electronic hand or taking that down temporarily, I'm just going to go again and ask, is there any dissent to the proposed amendment? No, I'm not seeing any dissent, so I declare the amendment carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now go back to the substantive item as amended. And obviously, the mover does have a right to close the debate and the seconder did not speak to the matter. So now I'll call, is there any dissent? Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. So I'll just repeat what I had already said to get my mind back into the thing. I'm not going to support the recommendation because even though it's for a business case and part of me thought, let's just go through with this and see where it heads. I have an issue particularly with option 2, McCallum and Taylor Reserve, because I think that is not the place for on the riverbank at one of our major parks for a synthetic turf, grass fields, and a hockey changing clubhouse and change rooms. So for that reason, I'm not going to support the recommendation, and I understand I probably may be on my own on that.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Is there anyone who would now like to speak in favour of the officer's recommendation as amended? Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Just really to share that there's been a significant period of time that the hockey club, working club, have actually been approaching the town to bring the idea of having the synthetic turf. It has not been an easy journey for the club or for the town to try and find locations. We really have struggled through this, but we've worked very hard to come up with these options. And the business case is simply to investigate. And part of that is actually about community consultation as well. So I'm disappointed to hear that at this late stage that, you know, there is an objection given the history, and it's something that could have been discussed leading up to this evening's council meeting. I guess one thing I would like to ask is that, is it possible if there is an elected member who doesn't want to support all of it, or is it just part of it? I know, is it possible, Mayor, to split the options and vote for them separately, or to just go forward for the whole recommendation? Because it's really important that this gets through. There has been so much significant work behind the scenes, and the business case is vital to be able to give not just the hockey club a voice in this project, but also those who have been consistently working on this for many years.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Anderson. I suppose that encompassed both you speaking to the item but also asking a question at the end of it. The way the officer's recommendation is framed is that the first recommendation includes 3 options, and the second part of the recommendation is some parameters for options 1 and 2, but not option 3. So what I am going to do is inquire of our governance coordinator tonight as to whether we can split the voting on the recommendation, given that what you're proposing is not about splitting the points within the recommendation, it's about splitting the points within one of the recommendations. That one I'm not quite sure about. So I wonder, Ms. Bray, are you able to assist, please?
Yes, through the chair, it would be quite difficult for us to split the recommendation as it is written at the moment. My suggestion would be to do an amendment to that recommendation to remove what is not wanted.
Thank you, Ms. Bray. Deputy Mayor Anderson, does that assist you at all? And you don't have to agree that it does, by the way.
No, it actually, no, it does assist me, because then I'll continue as the recommendation stands and as is represented by the working group. Thank you.
Sorry, so on that basis, I need not consider it further of your content to leave the recommendation as it stands. I should say for elected members, where a recommendation is in discrete parts. It is open to you to request the presiding member to put each recommendation separately, but as Ms. Bray has said, that isn't the way this particular recommendation is drafted. So we've had now a speaker for, following a speaker against. Is there anyone now who would wish to speak against? No. Anyone else who wishes to speak for? Look, I'll speak very briefly in relation to this matter. Sorry, I will then come to you, Councillor Ife. Having said that, I will speak briefly to it. I'm going to support the officer's recommendation that we move this matter towards a business case. I feel like it's probably been the missing piece of the puzzle since the hockey club first wrote to the town, what would now be some 20 years ago. I feel like over time there have been requests and there have been endeavours by the town to progress the question of a synthetic turf facility. None of those endeavours have been successful, and I think, as Deputy Mayor Anderson pointed out quite rightly, a number of them have been very difficult for both the club and our community, most importantly, to understand and engage in. And I feel like this is a body of work that is essentially investigative. It may be that in the course of the investigation, it concludes, as per Councillor Potter's observation, that McCallum and Taylor Reserve is not the location for such a facility. But I feel like we've done so much work collaboratively through the Higgins Park Master Plan process to bring a number of sporting clubs to the table and the community. We have heard what they've said, and I've no doubt we'll continue to hear their thoughts on this matter. But I feel like if we don't do some level of investigation on what are now, as a result of the work of the Hockey Working Group, the only remaining options that could be considered, now's the time to work out whether any of them are actually realistic. And in the process, part of the recommendation makes clear that we'll do that with community consultation, so that we'll have a really clear picture at the end of the process. And I feel like it's time to take this step as a precursor to realistically resolving this ongoing issue. So that's why I'll be supporting it. Councillor Ife and then Councillor Creamy.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'll speak briefly. I am going to support this recommendation. Personally, I have concerns around McCallum and Taylor Reserve. I share Councillor Potter's concerns. I share things that the community tells me, like, you know, the water table is not good enough down there, it'll be flooded and so on. But that's not information that I've had from someone who's actually an expert in this area. And I think we need a business case in order to rule in or rule out a space, and do so with a proper investigation that does include community consultation. I think that this gives 3 clear options. I think in the past we've run into a bit of a pickle where there's been one option. This at least gives some capacity for some exploration around 3 possibilities. And we need to hear from the community, but we also need to hear from people who do proper assessments of these spaces to see if they're appropriate. So I don't want anyone to get stressed right now about it. I also don't want anyone to get their hopes up right now about it. This has to progress to the next stage, and let's see what that next stage tells us before anybody starts getting concerned or excited.
Thanks, Councillor Ife. Councillor Creamy.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'm going to echo the comments that Councillor Ife just shared. I too will be supporting this recommendation. I also have concerns about option 2. However, I believe we need to progress to that business case process. It needs to be fully investigated with, you know, expert consultation and opinions and community consultation. And I really very much believe it is time for this Victoria Park Xavier Hockey Club to have this opportunity thoroughly investigated. They are one of many wonderful sporting clubs we have in our town, and I believe the responsibility is with all of us to do everything that we can for our sporting club. So I will be supporting this recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Karimi. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak? No one else has indicated a wish to speak. Councillor Hendricks. Oh, sorry, Councillor Alessandro.
Yes, more a question. My question just refers, when it talks about looking at the case for Taylor Reserve and McCallum, given the comments, would there be an environmental impact on that in terms of future water table that was mentioned within the report coming back? Thank you.
Well, Councillor Alessandro, the recommendation itself in point 2 says that with respect to options 1 and 2, and option 2 is McCallum Taylor, the business case scope considerations must include environment considerations such as tree impact opportunities, acid sulfate soils, impact of lighting, noise, etc. So I would consider the answer to your question is affirmative. The business case's scope, according to the recommendation from the officers, will include exactly that. Does that assist?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mayor Vernon. In that case, I will be supporting the recommendation, and I do take on points with Councillor Potter in relation to some reservation, but I think it's important that we thoroughly investigate the case management, or the business case, and those locations, given the fact that the hockey club has for many years been trying to look for a location. So in that matter, I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alessandro. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? No, in that case, I'll go to Councillor Hendricks as the mover of the motion to close the debate, noting, of course, that you don't need to if you don't wish to, Councillor Hendricks, but this is your right to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Vernon. Yeah, I will have a quick word. Just reiterate that the hockey club is one of the largest clubs, sporting clubs we do have in the town, and also a very successful one, as you pointed out, with 4 members getting elected to the Australian side just this year, plus we've had many in the past. They've been asking this for 20 odd years, and they just seem to have no success. I think we owe it to them. This goes to the business case. A lot of work's gone into it at the working group, and I urge my fellow elected members to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hendricks. So elected members, we'll now invite you to vote, please. So I declare the recommendation carried. Those in favour, myself, Mayor Vernon, Councillor Hamer, Councillor Hendricks, Councillor Ife, Deputy Mayor Anderson, Councillor Alessandro, Councillor Devereux and Councillor Karimi, and those against, Councillor Potter. Thank you. Thanks everyone for your considered contributions to that debate. I know it's an important one, and so very much appreciate you all offering us your views about that. The next item on the agenda has already been dealt with by way of an exception resolution, which is 12.7, which does in those circumstances bring us to the end of the Chief Community Planners matters. And I note it is 8:03 p.m. and we've been sitting for an hour and a half. So in accordance with thinking of everyone's well-being, I'm actually going to propose that we have a 10-minute adjournment. So a short opportunity to have a break and stretch legs. Can I please move that we adjourn for 10 minutes from 8:05 p.m. and can I have a seconder for that, please? Yes, for the procedural motion, seconded Councillor Potter. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. So we'll now be heading off for a 10-minute adjournment. Can I encourage elected members to please switch off your microphones, ensure that your cameras are not switched on, and we will see you all back here at 8:15 p.m. sharp. Thank you. Everyone, it's now 8:15 p.m. And so we are resuming the council meeting. Can I inquire from our Minute Secretary and Governance, where's that recording?
The break was recording, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So we will resume, everyone. So we're about to move on to item 13, which is the Chief Operations Officer reports. Item 13.1 is the Lathlane traffic management plan evaluation, which is already dealt with in the exception resolution. So we move now to item 13.2, which is the Higgins Park Detailed Design Lead Consultant Tender Award. Can I invite Councillor Ife, who's declared a financial interest, to please leave the electronic meeting room, and understand our administration will be ushering you into a private breakout room any moment now. And can I ask Ms. Brayu to confirm when Councillor Ife is locked away securely in that room, please?
I can confirm Councillor Ife is now in the breakout room.
All right, thank you. The 13.2 Higgins Park Detailed Design Lead Consultant Tender Award. The recommendation here is that Council awards the contract associated with the public tender TVP /21/09 Higgins Park Detailed Design issued through Tenderlink to White House Architects Pty Limited, with the terms and conditions as outlined in the contract for the lump sum price of $617,105 exclusive of GST. Can I call for a mover and a seconder for the item, please?
Still seeking a seconder.
Moved Councillor Potter, seconded Deputy Mayor Anderson. Councillor Potter, did you wish to be heard?
No, thank you, Mayor Vernon.
Deputy Mayor Anderson, did you wish to be heard?
Not at this stage, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Anderson, noting that as the seconder, this is your only opportunity to be heard on this item.
I was going to wait and see the next conversation.
Okay, I do have some questions that I'd like to ask of the administration for this matter. So I did submit these questions previously to the administration, but I'll go through them now. My first question is, in accordance with the original resolution in December 2020, which required investigations to be made about the feasibility options of the existing buildings at Higgins Park, and noting that no decision has been made by Council to proceed with detailed design of only one co-located building on site, on what basis should a tender now be awarded to undertake the detailed design of just one building at this time? Direct that question to the Chief Operations Officer, Ms. Adams.
Thank you for the question, Mayor. I think the first thing I'll probably say is that currently we've got stage one underway. So stage one is the for the co-located facility feasibility options and the management model. So that study is going to inform what we're calling stage two, which is purely the concept design of the building, of the co-located building. So there's no decision made to proceed with the detailed design of the co-located building. And once we have the outcomes of stage one, we're hoping to come back to Council in May at the OCM and present it then. And that's when a decision can be made on how we will be proceeding with the co-located building. So we believe that this resolution, the recommendation that we put forward is actually in accordance with the resolution of December 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. So my next question is, given that the resolution in 2020 was not to proceed with a co-located building, it was to begin the design development phase, which included exploring the feasibility of retaining the other buildings already on site. How is it that we are now proceeding towards investigation of just one co-located building, and the tender that is being proposed before us tonight is actually for detailed work on one co-located building? Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I think for clarity, and I appreciate it's probably not clear in the report, stage 3 is the detailed design portion. So that is the detailed design of the master plan of the park. And we're not sure, it's going to be pending stage 1, what the outcome of the buildings would be. So there could be 2 buildings. We could have a refurb and extension. There might be a demolition suggested. So we're not sure what the outcome is. We do believe that it needs to be understood that the stage 1 will inform what will be happening with regards to the building or buildings.
Thank you. My next question then is this. It's said in the report that $300,000 exists in the current 2021-2022 budget associated with Higgins Park. And it also says in the officer's report that the approved municipal funding allocation consists of $500,000 for the 22-23 financial year. However, do you agree that there has been no approved municipal funding allocation in the 22-23 budget year at this time? Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do agree that it hasn't been approved for FY23. The budget is still obviously pending. I will say, however, it is a multi-stage project. It's a large project, and it is understood that it was going to be undertaken over a number of years. And those years do span the financial years, which is why there is some money that was set aside in FY22, with the remainder to be sitting across in this bridged contract type of arrangement in FY23. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Adams. So my follow-up question from that is that if we were to award this tender tonight, that means, does it not, that council has to endorse $500,000 in the 22-23 budget in order for this tender to effectively be delivered. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor. I would say that what you would be needing to do is actually give consideration to endorsing further funds in FY23 and being cognizant that this is a multi-year project that as a strategic project has largely been endorsed in principle, which is why we commenced it in FY22. So as to the actual value that has to be approved in FY23, it really has to cover the stage 1 works and the value of this tender. Whether or not, that any consideration wants to be given to any potential variations and increases, that can be dealt with separately. Thank you.
Thank you. To try and explore this and make it clear, so the current budget amount of $300,000 in the current financial year, the report says we will not have expended all of that by 30 June 2022, and there will be a carry forward of approximately half of that money into next year's budget. But if we do that, we still won't have enough money to pay for this tender unless we award $500,000 in the next budget for 22-23. That's the point I'm trying to seek clarification from you. Do you agree with that proposition, Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. Not quite. The reason why there is a carry forward is due to the billing stages of that contract. So in reality, if this contract is awarded as requested, the funds will still go towards, like the remaining funds out of the 300,000, when you take away the stage 1 funds, will go towards funding this tender value, with the remainder to come out of the budget for FY23. I hope that makes sense.
I certainly understand that point, Ms. Adams, but the point I'm trying to get at is, do you agree that if we award this tender tonight, we will have no choice but to put $500,000 into the 22-23 budget? It won't be something that we can choose to leave out. We'll have to put it in. Otherwise, this tender award can't be paid for. Do you agree with that?
Thank you, Mayor. You will need to set aside funds to cover the remainder of this tender. As to whether it needs to be the full $500,000 can be discussed further during the budget discussions. It can be potentially less. It just needs to cover the amount of this 617 odd thousand plus the stage 1 works. But you will need to set aside funds in FY23 to cover the remainder of this, yes.
Thank you. Look, that's all the questions that I had. Well, now, unless there's anyone else who's got any questions about this item, now going to proceed to deal with it in accordance with meeting procedures, local law. So, Councillor Potter, accepting that you've got a right of reply at the end. Deputy Mayor Anderson, you don't wish to be heard? All right, thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against this item? So I'm going to put up my own hand. I'm not going to use my electronic hand. I'm not going to support the officer's recommendation, and in doing so, this has nothing to do with the proposed tenderer White House Architects. I'm not going to support this for a couple of reasons. The first one is that I don't consider that the officer's report indicates that what is being proposed is in compliance with the December 2020 resolution. What's being said is that this work, the stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3, is all about advancing design work on a single co-located facility. And as I understood the 2020 resolution, it was that in the design development phase, there would be a feasibility study about each of the buildings that currently exist at Higgins Park to understand whether or not they should ultimately end up being put together into one co-located facility or not. And so that, in my view, requires exploration of those buildings before you award a tender to an organisation to start developing detailed designs for one single co-located facility. If that doesn't end up being the direction that council takes, that money will essentially, a big portion of it will have been wasted, if not potentially all of it. So I have that concern, and my second concern is about the budget. We are halfway in the middle of our budget workshops at the moment, and it's pretty clear we've got some challenges that we need to overcome financially, and looking at the amount of work that we can possibly do or that council should endorse becomes part of both the operating expenditure of the town and the capital expenditure of the town. It is clear to me that some tough choices are going to need to be made. And in fact, everything that's been presented to us so far suggests that that is exactly right. Clearly, this project is not as far advanced as some other projects in the town, like the McMillan Precinct Master Plan project, like other projects that we have yet to spend out money on that are already proceeding and are well down the track of detailed design work, such as Zone 1 at Lacklane Park. And indeed, other projects fall into the same regard, such as Edward Millen Park upgrade. So what concerns me is awarding a tender at this stage, which the effect of which would mean, in my understanding, that we would have to then allocate a specific amount of money in the next financial year's budget. In other words, we wouldn't have a choice about it. Awarding this contract means we would have to make that allocation of money sufficient to cover payment of this tender. I don't know any other way to deal with it. My understanding is that tenders can only be accepted or rejected. So it's not as if I consider there's an alternate that is open. It appears that no procedural motion is open to simply defer it for some further consideration later. So for all those reasons, I've had to reach my conclusion that I can't support the award of this tender at this time. Thank you. Is there anyone now who would wish to speak in favour of the item? No. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against? Councillor Hamer.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I share your opinion from what I've learnt with the time we spent with the budget work. There seems to be some holes in all our budget modelling tools, and bringing more projects online that aren't far along in the process doesn't seem like a priority to be heading towards. This might be one of those projects that we delay until we've found some clear air.
Thanks, Councillor Hamer. Councillor Hendricks, I was going to call for speakers in favour. Were you wanting to ask a question, or were you ready to speak to the item?
I was wanting to ask a question, if I could, please, Mayor Vernon.
Sure.
So the question, subject I've brought up before, the main thing that needs to be done urgently there is the installation of the lights. That's what the footy club's really waiting for. And I was just wondering how much design work needs to be done before we know where those lights can go so they can go ahead. Do we need to spend this whole $617,000 to get that far, or can it be done on a smaller budget?
Thanks, Councillor Hendricks. I'll direct your questions to the Chief Operations Officer, Ms Adams.
Through the chair, the lighting for the football club is actually taken into account as part of these works. But as you can appreciate, we can't pick and choose from that contract. It's included as part of the overall amount. Thank you.
So, sorry, Ms Adams, just to get Councillor Hendricks an answer to both of his questions. The first part of his question was about when would the floodlights be able to be done, and are they included as part of this? You're referring to the design work for the floodlights, or are you suggesting that the floodlights will be delivered within this tender?
Just let me check on something for one moment, please. Through the chair, I think that the lights and the design work may have been de-scoped with the changes that were made through this tender. So it may be that that could be a separate item for consideration.
So, sorry, are we able to get some clarity? Is that the case? And then it leads to Councillor Hendricks's other question, is about how long it's going to take. I think he's interested in how long it's going to take to get the floodlights in. Is that right, Councillor Hendricks? Councillor Hendricks, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry, Mayor Vernon. Yeah, that was what I was essentially getting at. But what I understood is that before we knew where the lights could be placed, we had to do this whole design thing. And I was just wondering if this whole design thing is like this $617,000, do we need to go to that stretch before we can know where the lights go, or can it be done on a smaller budget? So what I'm hearing just then, if they've put it separate, sounds like it can be done earlier. But yeah, so that's what I was essentially asking. Is it part of this $617,000 in order to get the lights done, or can it be done separately?
All right, thank you. So, Ms Adams, are you able to confirm, is the floodlighting design part of this tender or not?
Through the chair, I can confirm it's actually not part of this tender.
Thank you. Councillor Hendricks, did you have any further questions?
No, because it wouldn't pertain to this particular recommendation then. But thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hendricks. So in accordance with our meeting procedures, obviously I've spoken against the item, Councillor Hamer's spoken. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard before I call upon the mover of the motion to close the debate? No, in that case, Councillor Potter, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to be heard in closing the debate?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Only to say I'm really, again, much the same as what you've said. I'm very concerned about the amount of money that this is going to put into the 2022-23 budget. There's already so many constraints on that for projects. So I just feel like this is the wrong time to be awarding a tender of this size for this project. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. So now we need to go to the vote. So if people please vote on this item. I declare the recommendation lost unanimously by all 8 elected members who are present. Ms. Bray, as our governance coordinator tonight, as a result of the recommendation being lost and it being a tender, we're not required to move anything alternate, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. That concludes item 13.2, and we welcome back Councillor Ife into the meeting room. Thank you. So we're now moving on to item 13.3, which is the delegation for the CEO for 3-bin Garden Organic System Procurement Award. So the recommendation for this is that Council 1 notes that the town will be requesting tenders in March 2022 for the supply and delivery of the 3rd bins and red lids, and secondly, delegates authority to the Chief Executive Officer to formally accept a tender up to the amount of $417,000 and award a contract for the procurement of the 3rd bin supply and lid changeover required for the Garden Organic 3-bin system, providing the award represents the best value for money as assessed and the award value is within the mid-year budget review approval for the project budget. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for the recommendation?
Still seeking a seconder.
So moved myself, Mayor Vernon, seconded Councillor Potter. I don't wish to be heard on this item. Councillor Potter, do you wish to be heard?
No, thank you, Mayor Vernon.
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's the case, but I did understand, Councillor Devereux, you might have some questions about this item. Did you want to ask those before I go further?
If I may, Mayor Vernon, I'd appreciate the chance. Thank you. I have sought some clarity around the bin situation and I wanted to just ask one question that sort of emerges from the information that I've obtained, which was just in relation to the future FOGO bin. That wouldn't be the immediate result of this work, but would be the anticipated result further down the track. And I just wanted to ask if once FOGO is instituted in the town, is it planned that after community engagement and education, that the red bin, the existing rubbish bin, not the recycling bin, would which then with FOGO would not now contain food waste, would that be collected weekly, or could it be, or would it be anticipated that that may be collected fortnightly, as I understand it is in some other councils after FOGO introduction? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Devereux. Our Chief Operations Officer, Ms Adams, is this a question that you would wish to answer, or do you want this to be dealt with by the Manager of Technical Services, Mr Wong?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could you direct that to Mr Wong, please?
Sure. Mr Wong?
Yep, thank you, through the Chair. So the current 3 bin, or the 3rd bins, what we call the lime lit bins, which we are proposing to purchase for garden organics, will be in future used for collection of FOGO, or food organics and garden organics materials. So basically, once they have been converted into FOGO bins, they will be collected on a weekly basis. And then at that point, the general waste bins will be collected on a fortnightly basis. I hope I've answered the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Wong. Councillor Devereux?
That answers very concisely, yes. Thank you, Mayor Vernon.
Thank you. We'll now ask, is there any dissent? No, there being no indication of dissent, I'll declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 13.4, which has already been dealt with by exception resolution, and the same is true of item 13.5, which then leads us into item 14, which is the Chief Financial Officer reports. Item 14.1 and 14.2 have already been dealt with by exception resolution, taking us to 14.3, which is our annual budget review 2020. This does require an absolute majority. So the recommendation is that Council 1 adopts the audited actual opening surplus position for 2021-2022 financial year as $784,498, being $380,563 worse than the budget estimated opening surplus position of $1,165,061, noting that the determination of the allocation of those funds is contained within the 21-22 annual budget review, pursuant to Regulation 31 of the Local Government Financial Management Regulations 1996. Secondly, adopts the 21-22 annual budget review as contained within the attachments pursuant to Regulation 33A of the Local Government Financial Management Regulations 1996. And 3, approves the amendments to the 21-22 annual budget detailed in the 21-22 annual budget review as contained within attachments pursuant to Section 6.8 of the Local Government Act 1995. Can I call for a mover and a seconder, please?
Still seeking a mover.
Moved myself, Mayor Vernon, seconded Councillor Karimi. I don't wish to be heard. Councillor Karimi, do you wish to be heard as the seconder?
No, thank you.
Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of item 14. Item 15 is committee reports. Items 15.1, 15.2 and 15.3 have been dealt with by exception resolution. That does bring us to 15.4, which is the Waste Local Law 2022. This is a matter that has come straight to Ordinary Council meeting and did not go through the agenda briefing forum because of the timing of the Policy Committee. This does require an absolute majority for the Waste Local Law. The recommendation for this to Council from the Policy Committee is that Council determines that as a result of the review of the Town of Victoria Park Health Local Law 2003 as amended, that clauses 39 through to 48 inclusive of that local law be repealed and replaced in accordance with section 3.16 of the Local Government Act 1995. Secondly, gives notice that it intends to make the Town of Victoria Park Waste Local Law 2022 as at attachment 1, which will repeal clauses 39 through to 48 inclusive of the Town of Victoria Park Health Local Law 2003 as amended in accordance with sections 3.12 and 3.13 of the Local Government Act 1995, subject to the word third being replaced with the word fourth in clause 25 subsection 2. And thirdly, seeks the consent of the Chief Executive Officer of the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation to the proposed Town of Victoria Park Waste Local Law 2022. The purpose of this local law is to provide for the protection of the natural and urban environment and the mitigation of environmental hazards through ensuring the appropriate disposal of local government waste. The effect of this local law is to A, provide for regulation, control and management of waste services, and B, establish the requirements with which any owner or occupier of premises using the Town of Victoria Park Waste Services must comply. Can I call please for a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Moved Councillor Devereux, seconded Councillor Hendricks. Councillor Devereux, as the mover, do you wish to be heard?
No, Vernon, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hendricks, as the seconder, do you wish to be heard?
No, thank you, Mayor Vernon.
Thank you. Is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to item 15.5, Agenda Briefing Forum, Public Participation Results of Trial. This matter has also come straight to council meeting due to the timing of the Policy Committee last month. The recommendation is that Council 1 notes the results of the trial period for the removal of the second public participation time at agenda briefing forums, and secondly, approves the permanent removal of the second public participation time at agenda briefing forums. Councillor Potter, understand you wish to test an alternate motion ahead of the officer's recommendation. Is that right?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Vernon. My alternate motion is as follows: that Council 1 notes the results of the trial period for the removal of the second public participation time at agenda briefing forums, and 2, retains the second public participation time at agenda briefing forums for only A, those items on the agenda, and B, those members of the public who did not participate in the first public participation time on that agenda briefing forum. So it's slightly different to words you've got in front of you.
Oh, okay.
I did send an amendment through later this afternoon.
That's fine. If I can just check with the Minute Secretary, do you have access to the latest version of Councillor Potter's alternate motion?
Just a moment, I'll update that now and get that on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you. While we're doing that, Councillor Potter, would you care to outline your reasons for this alternate?
Yeah, my reasons are there are members of our community who for reasons of work, family commitments, or some other reason cannot attend the agenda briefing forum by the completion of the first public participation time. This alternate motion allows those people who still attend later in the meeting to address full council with their questions or statements on agenda items ahead of the ICM.
Thank you. So we now have is that your final?
No,
version?
it's not.
No, it's still not uploaded. Ms. Horner, are we getting close to being there yet?
I'm having trouble locating it.
So the only difference is that the words were unable were changed to did not. So yeah.
I think Councillor Potter, didn't you have a further change? It was around the for only. Wasn't it only for rather than for only?
Yes, only for rather than for only, I think. I'm very confused as to, no, it was for only was the change, so I don't know.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, it's there now.
Yes,
that's it.
But we do have from the change that Ms. Horner's just made, we do have one extra word. So it should read who did not participate.
And then without the word to.
You don't, that's right, don't need the word to in that sentence. So Ms. Horner, can you delete the word to before the word participate, please? Right, Councillor Potter, you're happy now that that is reflecting your alternate motion?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Can I call please for a seconder? So seconded Councillor Devereux. Councillor Potter, would you like to speak substantively to your alternate motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Vernon. I'll speak just briefly. So when I was considering the resolution from the committee and looking at who I thought would be missing out or could be missing out if that resolution went ahead, I considered that if there were members of our community who wanted to discuss something not on the agenda, but for some reason could not make the start of meetings, they would be able to come and present to us at the end of an ICM on their item that is not to do with the agenda. And for most other people, we've always been of the mind to extend our public participation time so that if there's a gallery full of people who have something that they want to say, we've allowed our community to say it. So this really was for those people who, for some reason, are not able to make that time, and for that they had something burning that they wanted to say that's on the agenda that we needed to hear before an ICM. And I considered that if they weren't able to make it early for an ABF, possibly not able to make it early for an ICM. So that was the reasons that I put some parameters around this, because I also recognise that we do give our community a lot of time to participate and ask their questions and make their statements. So I don't think we're giving them less time, but I just didn't want someone to fall in the gap. So I figured this was the way to fill those gaps.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Devereux, as seconder of the alternate, do you wish to be heard?
Yes, please, Mayor Vernon. I just wanted to say I'm really pleased to have this alternate motion because I think public participation in the work of the council is always valuable, regardless of who comes and what they share. I think it brings a sense of ownership to the work of the council. It brings a diverse view that might be not something that's always heard. And I value the fact that in the town of Victoria Park, we have more opportunities for people to do that perhaps in some other councils, and I really value that, and I think the community values that as well. And we've just seen that through, for example, the consultation, the workshops we've had with the community, both through the online forum, but also through the workshops around their interest and their concerns for the budget that we're working on at the moment. So I really value all of those contributions, and I prefer those opportunities not to be limited. And so I really appreciate the alternate motion that retains some level of that in the briefing forums compared to the original recommendation. And on that basis, I would encourage people to support the alternate motion as a way to encourage and promote that perception and that reality of the openness of the council to hear from the community, both those that come regularly as well as an opportunity for those who may not come regularly but may value at a time that we don't expect to come along and share with us their views as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Devereux. Councillor I, you have your hand up. Not sure if it's for a question or if you're ready to speak on the item, but let me know which it is, because obviously I haven't yet called for speakers against. So
it's a question, if I may, Mayor Vernon.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's a question, I think, for Councillor Potter. Given how she spoke on this item, I'm broadly supportive of this alternate, but I just wanted to ask her views on point B. The point that was being made is for people who couldn't get there on time. So I'm wondering if the wording would be more appropriate to read something like the members of the public who were not in attendance at the time of the first public participation time, if that would more accurately reflect what she was seeking here.
I'm happy if somebody wants to make that change. I think I also wouldn't limit someone who maybe was there but didn't speak, and then because they heard something in the meeting had a burning reason to speak. I think the idea behind this is that for people who have spoken in the first part of public participation time, that they don't keep speaking in many times over, because I think the idea was to make sure that people had the opportunity to speak. I think originally I had the words who were not able to, or was it not able to, or something? I can't remember what the words were, but on reflection, those words meant that someone would have to say whether that person had been able to or not. So I made it simpler to did not participate. But, I'm not going to die in the ditch over those words. Happy to take your words if you want, if that's what the rest of the elected members wish.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. For Councillor Potter's benefit, her words which appeared up on the screen originally were unable to participate. So that was the word that she was looking for. Councillor Ive, did you have any other question?
Not at this stage, no. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamer is next, then Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Mine was just another question which Councillor Potter half answered in her answer to Councillor I. It was part B. It was the reason for not allowing someone to ask a question at the end if they've already asked a question. I did feel if they were at the agenda briefing and something popped up, would be beneficial for them to be able to ask a follow-up question. I didn't see the logic in restricting that if, but yeah, I wanted some more clarification on her reason for limiting that possible double option.
Councillor Potter.
I guess my main reason for this was to get to put in a stopgap for people who are not able to make that first part of the meeting. If somebody has asked a question in the public participation time, or made a statement, or participated in some way, there is another opportunity for them to do that at the beginning of the OCM. And if it's something that they've got a burning wish to be heard on, a lot of people, in my experience, turn up at both of those meetings. So they do have another opportunity to speak and clarify things at the beginning of the OCM. So for me, this was literally about the people who were not able to attend the beginnings of meetings, and for us to be able to hear from them on agenda items before we make a decision at the OCM. Because at the OCM, it's too late because the decision's already been made. So for me, that was the point that I was trying to get to here. So perhaps Councillor Ife's suggestion is the right suggestion, and happy to change those words. I was just trying to find some words that was going to get to my ultimate filling that gap in the end.
Thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Hamer?
No, that answers my question. I mean, it's something I probably will support. I just wanted to ask some more clarification around why the restriction to.
Do you have clarification from Councillor Potter now?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Mevan.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councillor Hendricks, you did have your hand up, but you've taken it down. Do you no longer wish to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Vernon. Actually, my question was in line with what Councillor Hamer brought up. In fact, it's almost exactly the same. But my solution to it would have been to actually remove Part B altogether.
Well, Councillor Hendricks, unfortunately, this is an opportunity to ask questions about the proposed resolution rather than your potential solutions to it. If you've got a question that encompasses your solution, you want to put that forward for the mover of the alternate motion, then by all means formulate it as a question, please. Otherwise, you need to confine your remarks to your either what you want to say about the matter or an amendment if you're proposing to make it. So,
okay, well, as a question then, would the mover of the motion be prepared to drop Part B altogether and just have it for the people that that are just restricted to agenda items only? And the reason for that is exactly what Councillor Hamer mentioned, because sometimes during the meeting their mind gets jogged at something that's important that they want an answer to, and I think it's beneficial to elected members as well. So I think people should have the opportunity just to ask those sort of questions. But the key to it is that it's an agenda item. So so I was just asking the question if the mover of the motion would be prepared to drop Part B altogether.
I'll ask that question of Councillor Potter. Councillor Potter?
No.
Thank you. That's the answer to that. Any further questions, Councillor Hendricks?
That's it at this stage. Thank you, Mayor Vernon.
Thank you. Councillor Alessandro.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Vernon. Just in relation to the discussions about amending section point B, I'm just wanting some clarification. I'm comfortable with the current wording, but I'm wanting to know if there are members in the gallery who don't choose to participate in the first section, but then listen to the debate in this throughout the meeting at the ABF and then have questions, I'm wondering whether it will affect their ability then to be able to ask questions at the later stage. I think kind of having saying that they're not present or they're not able to, they don't ask a question at the beginning. I just think that I think moving an amendment may jeopardise that. So I'm just wanting some clarification about whether that would occur. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Lysandro, you really do need to try and confine yourself to just the question you're asking. So I think, Councillor Potter, do you understand the question that Councillor Lysandro is asking?
Yep. Thank you, Mayor Vernon.
What's your answer, please?
With the current wording, if someone does not participate in the first part of public participation time, they would be able to participate in the second part of public participation time.
I'm comfortable then with the current wording. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lysandro. Are there any other questions from elected members about the alternate motion? If there aren't any, we'll move into the meeting procedures process of asking for people to now speak. So we've already heard from the mover and the seconder. So is there anyone who wishes to speak against? Anyone else who would wish to speak now for? I'm happy to indicate that I'll speak in favour of this proposed alternate. I thank Councillor Potter for putting this on the table. In terms of the wording of clause B, that did come about as a result of a discussion that I had with Councillor Potter, and I'm grateful to her for taking that on board, and I did share that conversation in an email with elected members about whether or not it would be too limiting for the purposes of her alternate to simply say those members of the public who were unable to attend the first part. That would mean it would become limited to only people who came after public participation time at the beginning of the meeting had closed, and it would exclude someone who was listening during public participation time part one, heard then questions asked by elected members and heard answers given, and then decided that they understood what their question should be. They wouldn't have any opportunity to ask that question in the second public participation time without changing the words to read "did not participate" in it. So it is intended to ensure that that second public participation time, the very reason we did a trial, was to look at the use that is made of that time. And this is actually a quite significant step for the town in actually limiting the second public participation time, which is quite rare, to items that are on the agenda. It might surprise some people to know that many local governments who have agenda briefing forums and sessions only permit questions at that forum about the agenda item. In other words, they don't receive questions from their community about general items, only the items that are actually on the agenda. We have always allowed our community to ask any questions that they wanted during anything defined as public participation or public question time. And that will remain the case. They can still ask any question they want about any topic they want at future agenda briefing forums. The staff were not recommending that there be any change to that. Their only recommendation was to remove the second public participation time. So I am prepared to support it on the basis that it now does have some tight parameters around it, and they are designed to ensure that if the reason why you are wanting to use the second public participation time to ask questions, that it is actually about the agenda that you just sat and listened through and heard questions asked and from elected members and heard answers given, to inform yourself in case you want to make a submission at the next ordinary council meeting about that agenda item. I feel like that could be I'll call it a sensible halfway house between the removal of the second public participation time and ensuring that that public participation time is used wisely and efficiently. Bearing in mind that council does have a great deal of business to transact at its ordinary council meeting, and spending time going through the entire agenda at an agenda briefing forum is purposeful, but also it can't be an unlimited exercise. It's got to be focused. So I think that this proposal gives the right focus to that, so I will support it. Councillor Lysandro, I was going to call for anyone else who'd like to speak. Do you have more questions, or were you waiting to speak to the matter?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'm just wanting to speak to the matter. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Potter for proposing this alternate motion, and I believe, as Councillor Devereux has mentioned, that any opportunity and every opportunity for our community to be able to make their voice heard on agenda items. I think this strikes a good balance in terms of looking at items on the agenda and allows for that participation, as Mayor Vernon has indicated in her response, that if you are sitting in the gallery but do not participate in the first section, you are then able to participate in the second lot of public participation at an ABF. So on those points, I'll be supporting this alternate motion, and I think that it is quite unique that the town does have a second lot of public participation, and I'm happy that, that this alternate motion has been presented. So thank you once again to Councillor Potter. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sandro. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Can I speak against it?
You absolutely may speak against it, yes.
Okay, well, I'll speak against this motion. I agree with the having or retaining the second public participation time at the ABFs, but I'm against Part B. I think that's too restrictive. I think the key here is that it sticks to only agenda items, and certainly if someone's at the meeting and they're prompted or something that we say at the meeting just jogs their memory to ask a question, I think it's important they get that opportunity to ask that question. And for that reason, I think I'm not voting for this amendment as it stands now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hendricks. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak? Otherwise, I'm going to put it to the vote. No one else is indicating they have a wish to speak. So on that basis, please now vote. So I'll declare the alternate motion is carried. Those in favour, myself, Mayor Vernon, Councillor Potter, Councillor Ife, Deputy Mayor Anderson, Councillor Sandro, Councillor Devereux and Councillor Creamy. Those against, Councillor Hamer and Councillor Hendricks. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your contribution to that debate. So that is the end of the committee items. So we now go to item 16 of our agenda, which is applications for leave of absence. Don't have any pre-submitted. Item 17, motion of which previous notice has been given. There are none. Item 18, questions from members without notice. Are there any questions? No, there being no questions from members without notice, we'll close that item. Item 19, new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. We have none. Item 20, public question time. We don't have any questions. Item 21, public statement time. We don't have any public statements. Item 22, matters for which the meeting may be closed to the public. I would like to move a procedural motion. That council one closes the meeting to the members of the public at 9:15 p.m. to consider item 22.1.1 in accordance with section 5.23 subsection 2 subparagraph A of the Local Government Act 1995, and 2 permits the Chief Executive Officer and the meeting secretary to remain in the chamber during discussion in accordance with clause 27 subparagraph 3, subparagraph A of the Town of Victoria Park Meeting Procedures Local Law 2019. Can I have a seconder, please, for the procedural motion? Seconded, Deputy Mayor Anderson. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Can I ask our administration team to please switch off the live recording for YouTube or send us into a virtual special room to do our confidential deliberations.
The breakout room has been opened.
All right, it's 10 p.m. and we are now back in full session, and we resume with item 22.2, which is the public reading of resolutions, which may be made public. And so I now read out the resolution that has now been passed on item 22.1.1. That resolution is that Council resolves that this report and its resolution remain confidential in accordance with section 5.23, subsection 2, subparagraph C, and 5.23, subsection 2, subsection E of the Local Government Act 1995. There being no other business of Council, I now declare the meeting is closed at 10:01 p.m. Thank you everyone for your attendance tonight and your participation. Thank you to those staff members that remain. I assume all the rest of them have probably gone home. And thank you to those who joined us on live streaming. So good night. We'll see you at